In the distant mid-Cretaceous epoch, as the North African plains gradually faded in the searing daytime heat, a vast and deep lost water world awakened quietly under the cover of nightfall. The air here was perpetually infused with the scent of damp soil and the distinct bittersweet aroma of mangrove flora. It was a realm belonging to flowing water, a domain of darkness and absolute stillness. At the center of crisscrossing ancient rivers, a backsail resembling a massive mountain peak slowly broke the water's surface beneath the moonlight without producing a single violent splash, leaving only the faint murmur of currents to echo under the night sky. This behemoth, stealthily gliding through the cold lunar shadows, was the Spinosaurus, the largest semi-aquatic carnivorous dinosaur in Earth's history, and the ultimate solitary traveler within that misty web of water. Tonight, by the gentle flicker of the hearth fire and through this narrative you need not burden your mind to remember, let us step together into his true life. Let us gaze upon an ancient soul that shattered conventional perceptions, and listen to that silent epic buried deep within parched riverbeds. He possessed an elongated frame and a beautifully refined, crocodile-like skull that struck caution into continental tyrants, yet he was destined, amidst the reshuffling of fate and eras, to single-handedly witness the quiet collapse of an underwater kingdom. His life was symbiosed with the currents, and with the eventual disappearance of the waters, it transformed into a gentle echo sweeping through the endless desert sands, while the ancestors of all his kin chased prey across the hardened land, trampling the earth with robust hind limbs. The destiny of the Spinosaurus took a sharp turn into a completely different, tranquil river system amid the interwoven waterways of Cretaceous North Africa. This represented a highly unusual evolutionary strategy. In an era when terrestrial resources began to suffer from brutal internal competition, the lineage of the Spinosaurus chose to retreat into the waters, reshaping their anatomy across countless generations. Their hind limbs grew compact and flat, optimized for strolling along soft riverbed silt or maintaining stable propulsion in deep water, while their bone density became remarkably heavy, resembling modern penguins and hippopotamuses, serving as a natural diving ballast. In those midnight hours where the mangrove canopy blotted out the sky, our protagonist Spinosaurus walked gracefully along the riverbed, his every movement achieving a beautiful synchronization with the surrounding currents. He had no need for frantic sprinting under intense heat, nor did he endure the cruel compression of gravity upon his joints. The water enveloped his dozen-ton frame with a gentle buoyancy, like a tender mother comforting her most gargantuan child. Yet, this extreme attachment to the aquatic world had its script written by fate from the very beginning. It meant he had mortgaged the entirety of his life's triumphs and sorrows to this interior North African water network, which could dry up at any moment due to continental drift. His elongated skull, stretching 1.7 meters, tilted upward slightly as his snout, patterned with delicate sensory pits, captured the faintest vibrations within the cold currents, weaving his own laws of survival in absolute quietude. This aquatic grid, woven from mist, mangrove roots, and hidden undercurrents, was his safest sanctuary, yet it also transformed into an invisible yoke slowly tightening across the expanse of time. In the strategic game for resources, the boundary where the river met the land was often a sensitive line of life and death, and another apex sovereign sharing the same skies, the Carcharodontosaurus, formed a subtle geopolitical balance of power with the Spinosaurus in total silence. The Carcharodontosaurus was a pure terrestrial killing machine, armed with shark-like serrated teeth and devastating explosive power, ruling the dry plains above the riverbanks. Yet, whenever the night reached its absolute deepest hour, these two titans representing opposite evolutionary extremes would inevitably meet on the ebbing tidal flats, engaging in a highly restrained and quiet standoff. It was a breathtaking scene. The distant primeval woodlands swayed in the night breeze, and the tides lapped against the shoreline rocks, creating a rhythmic, hypnotic tempo. The Carcharodontosaurus stood atop a moonlit sand ridge, letting out low rumbles from its throat, its icy gaze locked onto the water surface, yet it steadfastly refused to take a single step into the muddy depths. Meanwhile, our protagonist Spinosaurus kept the majority of his colossal frame concealed within the dark waters, leaving only the magnificent sail on his back to stand like an ancient shield in the darkness, reflecting a muted, low-saturation dark red sheen under the moonlight. He did not retaliate with volatile savage fury. Instead, leveraging the depth of the current, he kept his powerful forelimbs and sharp claws submerged just beneath the shimmering ripples, radiating an inviolable, steady aura. The two giants stared at each other for a long time in the unseasonal night wind, it was a wordless diplomacy of survival zones, a mutual compromise between top-tier sages. Ultimately, after a protracted silence, the Carcharodontosaurus slowly turned and retreated into the dense jungle, fully aware that waging war against this semi-aquatic giant in his watery domain carried a foolishly catastrophic price. With his unique underwater sovereignty, the Spinosaurus carved out a baseline of restraint and dignity within a ruthless theropod hell, yet, the most agonizing sting of destiny never came from external adversaries, but from the irreversible, quiet betrayal of the very home he relied on for survival. As the mid-Cretaceous progressed, the global climate underwent a cycle of violent fluctuations. Driven by plate tectonics, the North African landmass drifted slowly northward, causing the once moist monsoons to alter their course. Vast expanses of mangrove forests began to wither on a massive scale due to a lack of fresh water flushes, and the ancient rivers that once seemed bottomless degenerated into isolated mud pools exuding the stench of decay. For our protagonist Spinosaurus, this meant that the gentle buoyancy of the current was being drained from his body bit by bit, and gravity returned as a form of physiological torment. One can visualize, on an intensely arid summer night, the protagonist Spinosaurus lingering alone at the edge of a dying marsh that had already ceased to flow, his compact hind limbs moving with great difficulty across the parched, cracked clay, producing a heavy, scraping friction. The air no longer held the wet whispers of flowing water from days gone by, only dry dust relentlessly battered his increasingly desiccated hide. He attempted to submerge his head into the residual muddy puddles, but his highly sensitive snout no longer perceived the abundant traces of swimming fish, only the signals of extreme scarcity and the bitterness of silt. A bitterer sorrow weighed upon his inner heart. Due to the fragmentation of the water systems, communication with his own kind became nearly impossible, and those low-frequency mating calls that once echoed through the midnight rivers were now reduced to his own lonely, unanswered reverberations. This was a dark punishment of desiccation, devoid of deafening cosmic meteor impacts, characterized only by water receding soundlessly into the passage of time, pushing this semi-aquatic king inch by inch toward the precipice of life. When every avenue of retreat was entirely severed, the protagonist Spinosaurus made a heavy decision full of semi-aquatic courage and a sense of destiny, to abandon the ancient riverbeds where he had lived for half a century, now completely reduced to desert sand, and seek out the legendary, unknown source of deep water. It was a protracted, agonizing exodus that verged on suicide for a semi-aquatic dinosaur. They were forced to use those compact hind limbs, wholly unsuited for long land journeys, to measure a scorching, mercilessly dry wilderness. Accompanying family members dropped out one by one amidst the swirling dust storms, some collapsing beside the skeletal remains of dried mangroves from prolonged dehydration, never to open their eyes again. Late one night under a canopy of countless stars, the migrating remnant ground to a halt within a valley cluttered with jagged rocks, extreme starvation and the exhaustion of the march pushing the protagonist's physical reserves to their ultimate limit. He knelt upon the frozen sand, the magnificent crimson sail on his back, which once symbolized supreme sovereignty and majesty, now appearing weather-beaten and powerless against the biting night wind. In this despairing hour, a juvenile Spinosaurus, unable to tolerate the internal heat and intense thirst, emitted an exceptionally faint cry, like the frail weeping of a small bird. In the silence, the old giant slowly opened his weary eyes, a rare flash of tenderness and absolute resolve gleaming within his deep, clear pupils. He leaned down, pressing his massive, heavy snout gently against the calf's forehead, converting the scarce, precious moisture within his body through subtle exhalations into a humid mist, softly comforting this fragile life. High above, the ancient Milky Way flowed silently, looking like an eternal river suspended in the cosmos, seemingly mocking this herd of giants dying of thirst on the ground. On this wasteland devoid of any water murmurs, the semi-aquatic titan employed his final, warm persistence to erect a wordless fortress of paternal care and racial dignity in the dark. In the 10th year of the migration, amidst the ticking countdown toward the prelude of the late Cretaceous mass extinction, the protagonist Spinosaurus finally arrived at the final spiritual sanctuary of his life. It was a deep-water lake fed by massive underground springs tucked securely within a deep, ancient rift valley, where a remnant shroud of moist mist belonging to the old world still lingered. However, consecutive years of severe dehydration, the intense physiological stress of environmental upheaval, and the catastrophic wear and tear of land walking had completely spent the fire of life within this underwater king. Late one windless, star-filled night, breathtaking emerald auroras unusually rippled across the heavens, staining the motionless lake surface a dreamlike, surreal jade color. Slowly and with immense decency, the Spinosaurus slid his massive frame into these long-lost deep waters. As the cold, gentle current coursed over his dry scales once more and cradled his heavy bones, he seemed to hear the call of ancestors from millions of years ago. His long neck swayed gracefully beneath the surface as he dived one final time toward the deepest, darkest, unknown core of the lake center, the ultimate pursuit of his entire life, and his rightful final resting place. The calf, now fully grown, stood at the water's edge for an eternity, letting out long calls that carried far into the night sky, like a final elegy sung for this magnificent father. Deep within the waters, the protagonist Spinosaurus closed his eyes, his cardiac rhythm aligning perfectly with the ancient metronomy of this subterranean watercourse, growing slower and slower until it fused entirely into eternal tranquility. He was not cast aside by his era amidst frantic roaring. Instead, he chose to withdraw from this ancient North Africa he had once ruled and deeply loved with absolute grace and decency, enveloped by the deep whispers of the current. As the grand magic of geological transformation played out across tens of millions of years, that deep water lake which once entombed all the secrets of the Spinosaurus was ultimately buried entirely by wind and sand during a period of extreme aridity, turning into the scorching, cold, and unyielding red rock strata deep beneath the modern Sahara Desert today. Those mountain-like skeletons and the heavy frame that once propelled smoothly underwater were gradually carved by silt and minerals into immortal fossils, becoming the most incredible biological puzzle in the eyes of human paleontologists. Whenever the modern midnight descends and the biting desert winds sweep over the gravel barrens of Morocco, those red sail skeletal joints sequestered deep within thousands of meters of rock walls seem to still radiate a faint, ancient sigh in the dark. The Spinosaurus, this sole semi-aquatic titan of the age of dinosaurs, never surrendered the masterfully restrained poise of a semi-aquatic lone survivor amidst brutal land carnage, nor did he exhibit meaningless panic before the cold betrayal of his era. He simply returned the vital buoyancy of life calmly as the waters receded. The legacy he surrendered to this world is not restricted to those rule-breaking, bizarre skeletal frameworks. It is a profound midnight echo of how life, when confronting an absolute and irreversible destiny, can stubbornly safeguard its semi-aquatic elegance and unique dignity. Watercourses may dry up, and the world may be remolded, but that red sail silhouette which once broke the water's surface amidst the midnight mangroves has long since been permanently branded into the absolute depths of Earth's memory. Now, the night has grown exceedingly deep, and the dust on the North African wastes has finally quieted. That giant resting in eternal slumber beneath the deep water has already fallen into a profound sleep in the distant cradle of time. And you, who have faithfully accompanied this long, stealthy journey, may now shed every ounce of your exhaustion and defenses, close your eyes, and along with this gentle murmur of the current, dissolve into the most secure and sweetest of dreams.